And away we go, episode 1166 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. It is the final day of September 2025. It is the first day of 2025 Wizards training camp. Yes, that is beginning. It is taking place at the MedStar Health Performance Center in Washington, D.C. The Wizards on Monday morning announced a 21-player training camp roster. Among the players on the roster, of course, Alex Sarr, who the Wizards took with the number 2 overall pick in the 2024 NBA draft, and he is listed as being 7 feet and 224 pounds, 19 pounds heavier than his listed weight for last season, 205 pounds. Our guy Alex Sarr has bulked up. Good for him. This coming season will be just his age 20 season. You know, the Wizards may be rebuilding and tanking, but that doesn't mean that their players can't be jacked. Hello and welcome to this Tuesday installment of the Al Galdi podcast. The Wizards' last playoff series win came against, do you remember, the Atlanta Hawks in the first round of the 2017 NBA playoffs. Yes, a while ago. Well, the Commanders are coming off a loss at Atlanta, as in the Falcons, a 34-27 loss on Sunday afternoon, dropping our team to 2-2 in the NFL's 2025 regular season. We on Monday afternoon had the day after the game press conference of Commanders head coach Dan Quinn, and the number one topic at the presser, as expected, was the defense. What went wrong at the Falcons? What is going wrong overall? How does it get fixed? All of that and more was addressed by Quinn. Next segment, in-depth conversation about the Commanders' defense, including the Marshon Lattimore problem. Not to pick on one guy, but he is supposed to be the team's number one cornerback, the team's CB1. He instead, quantifiably, has been one of the worst cornerbacks in the NFL so far this season. And then the following segment, I'll discuss the Commanders' offense, including updates on quarterback Jayden Daniels and right guard Samuel Cosmi. Might each guy be back for the team for its game at the Los Angeles Chargers this Sunday afternoon at 4:25. Also, I'll examine surprisingly positive advanced stats for quarterback Marcus Mariota for his work in the loss at the Falcons. And also on the show, I'll talk Orioles' reaction to the end-of-season press conference of Orioles president of baseball operations and general manager Mike Elias on Monday. As remember, this is the only podcast or show about Washington, D.C. area sports that gives you consistent, in-depth Orioles analysis. We do not forget those of you who grew up in the D.C. area in the 1970s and or 1980s and or 1990s as Orioles fans, because there was no MLB team for Washington, D.C. Before we get to some feedback, the Capitals, they in the NHL's 2025 preseason are 3-0 with 3 games left. Next up at the Columbus Blue Jackets Tuesday night at 7, the grade 8 winger Alex Ovechkin. He is preparing for his age 40 season. He, on the first day of training camp, September 18th, suffered a lower body injury, but he on Monday morning was a full participant in practice for the first time since getting hurt. And head coach Spencer Carberry, during his post-practice session with reporters on Monday morning, said that Ovi could play in the Caps' final 2 games of the preseason. So good news there. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me, the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Lots of feedback on the Commanders off their loss at the Falcons, especially the defense and defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. Email from Kyle Goins, writes Kyle, Al, furious, doesn't even describe how I feel about this loss. For 3 out of 4 quarters, we made the team that just finished dropping a goose egg look like a Super Bowl contender. Our defense got torched. Our secondary looked so horrendous, I wouldn't have been surprised to see that Jack Del Rio had snuck in the booth and stolen the headset from Joe Witt. There's one person specifically whose performance is almost unforgivable, Marshon Lattimore. I don't mind the penalties if you're actually making an impact each play, but good grief, it almost looked like Forbes was back out there, and that doesn't even mention how our O-line seemed to have the integrity of wet toilet paper. I look forward to possibly hearing Mark Bullock this week to break down all that went wrong. Thanks for your consistent hard work, Al, and hopefully your week goes better than this past Sunday went. Thank you for the email, Kyle. Email from Gil. Writes Gil, hey Al, love your pod. I try not to overreact early in the season, but I'm going to overreact anyway. At what point do we have to think about letting Joe Witt Jr. go? I know he's not working with the most talented personnel, but sometimes, maybe even most of the time, it's not one of our players getting beat. You have to try to cover someone to get beat. We've been watching players run free for over 20 games now. It seems like Witt preaches better communication after each game without the communication ever getting better. Also, Is there no way to scheme up a defense to hide your weaknesses? Last year, every team picked on St. Juice. This year, Lattimore. Week after week, nothing seems to change. Do we expect Lattimore to miraculously get better, or is there really no way to scheme things differently to help him? Maybe that's a question for Mark Bullock. I know Witt inherited an embarrassment of a defense, but at what point do we need to ask if Witt Jr. isn't helping the problem? Keep up the good work. Thank you for the email, Gil. Well, multiple requests for Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Phone Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. And Mark will be on Wednesday's show. And trust me, we'll have a lot to say about the defense. Email from Sterling Porter. Right, Sterling. Hello, Al. The offense wasn't elite, but did enough to win, in my opinion. I think we need to start talking about Joe Witt and the defense. I like Joe Witt, and I think that he articulates his vision for the defense in a clear manner. However, it's not working. It appears he has the pieces he said he needed, and there were no major players out injured. So what's going on? Maybe it's not fair to compare this game to the Panthers game, but there had to be something that he could have taken from that game to slow down the Falcons' offense. Should DQ take the play calling duties? One other note on the defense. Can Lattimore play slot? I think Sainristil is better on the outside. Unless Lattimore can play slot, I am just about done with him. As always, keep up the good work. God bless you and your family. Thank you for the email, Sterling. The Commanders' defense over 4 games in this regular season has been good in 2 games and bad in 2 games. I don't think that that's enough bad to strip Joe Witt of defensive play calling duties. Doing that would be a major move and would come across as a panic move this early in this season. Now, if the defense continues to struggle, I am more than open to stripping Joe Witt of defensive play calling duties. But if you're Dan Quinn and you do believe in Witt as your defensive coordinator, you don't strip him of defensive play calling duties off just 2 bad games this season. And yes, I do get that the defense wasn't exactly great last season. Look, if the defense does have a bad 2025 season, I don't think that it's a given that Witt should be back as the team's defensive coordinator next season. But we are a bit of a way away from that. Here's something to keep in mind with Dan Quinn, by the way. So he has an outstanding track record as a defensive coordinator. Quinn has had 2 stints as an NFL defensive coordinator. Quinn was the Seattle Seahawks defensive coordinator from January 2013 to February 2015. The Seahawks regular season rankings in total defense per DVOA with Quinn as defensive coordinator: 2013, number 1. 2014, number 1. Quinn was the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator from January 2021 to February 2024. The Cowboys regular season rankings in total defense per DVOA with Quinn as defensive coordinator: 2021, number 4, 2022, number 4, 2023, number 5. Dan Quinn, in each of his 5 regular seasons as an NFL defensive coordinator, has had a top 5 defense per DVOA. That is sensational. But Quinn, as an NFL head coach, has not had good defenses. He was the Falcons head coach from February 2015 to October 2020. The Falcons, over their 6 regular seasons with Quinn as head coach, never finished higher than number 14 in the NFL in total defense per DVOA. And now we have what we have with the Commanders. It's a funny thing. While defenses with Dan Quinn as defensive coordinator have been excellent, defenses with Dan Quinn as head coach have not been so good. What is good is Catering by Uptown. It provides catering to perfection. Whatever event you're planning, especially a wedding, visit cateringbyuptown.com. Mention that Al Galdi sent you and see what Catering by Uptown can do for you. If you are planning a wedding and you're searching for answers, searching for direction, searching for guidance, visit cateringbyuptown.com. Mention that Al Galdi sent you. See what Catering by Uptown can do for you. Catering by Uptown provides both great service and a great price. Catering by Uptown is a family business. It is run by the Pereiras, so they are great Commanders fans, loyal supporters of this podcast. Catering by Uptown specializes in handling everything so that you don't have to. Catering by Uptown understands that special events deserve to be celebrated in style and thus takes care of every detail so that you can enjoy your event. Great service, amazing cuisine, and reliability are the foundation of what makes Catering by Uptown one of the most referred caterers throughout Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Northern Virginia. And know this, if you go to cateringbyuptown.com and click on venues, you could set up your own personal tour of one of Catering by Uptown's premier venues, including outstanding waterfront venues. Catering by Uptown offers the ability to coordinate services at over 100 of the best reception halls, vineyards, farms, historic homes, event venues, banquet facilities, and wedding venues in the area. Visit cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. That's cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. Hey, please consider subscribing to the podcast if you're not already doing that. Subscribing to the podcast costs nothing. Make sure that you never miss an episode and helps out the podcast a lot. And if you're already subscribing, thank you. The best defensive coordinator in the history of the Commanders franchise is Richie Pettibone. He was the Redskins defensive coordinator for the 1981 through 1992 seasons. Richie Pettibone, Dabone, he thankfully still is with us. He now is 87 years old. He's famous for saying, "You got it, babe." That's his line. "You got it, babe." And one of the great thrills of my life was interviewing Richie Pettibone years ago and getting a "You got it, babe."
You got it, babe.
Yes, there it was. "You got it, babe." My own personal "You got it, babe" from Richie Pettibone. The closest that Washington has come to being consistently good defensively since Richie Pettibone's time as defensive coordinator was Greg Williams' time as the Skins' assistant head coach in charge of defense. Greg Williams, the G-R-E-G-G. Greg Williams. The Greg in Greg Williams is spelled with 3 G's. Never forget that. Greg Williams was the Skins' assistant head coach in charge of defense for the 2004 through 2007 seasons. He technically was not the Skins defensive coordinator. Greg Blasch, 2 G's, was the Skins defensive coordinator for those seasons, but those defenses were Greg Williams defenses. So the Skins had really good defenses in 3 of Williams' 4 seasons with the team. Here were the Skins' regular season rankings in total defense per DVOA with Greg Williams as assistant head coach in charge of defense. 2004, number 4. 2005, number 4. 2006, number 32. That 2006 defense was atrocious, but 2007, number 7. Not since Greg Williams has Washington had anything close to consistently good defense. Your Washington defensive coordinators since Greg Williams ran the Skins defense: Greg Blasch, Jim Haslett, Joe Barry, Greg Meduski, Jack Del Rio, and now Joe Witt Jr., who, as you may have heard during the feedback portion of the opening segment of the show, is taking some heat. The Commanders' defense was hideous in the team's 34-27 loss at the Atlanta Falcons this past Sunday afternoon, just as the defense was hideous in the 27-18 loss at the Green Bay Packers on Thursday Night Football on September 11th. The Commanders' defense was good in the team's 2 wins this regular season, but those 2 opposing offenses not exactly elite. The 21-6 win over the New York Giants at Northwest Stadium on September 7th, and the 41-24 win over the Las Vegas Raiders at Northwest Stadium on September 21st. Commanders head coach Dan Quinn, he did his day after the game press conference on Monday afternoon, a Tell the Truth Monday for Quinn, with a somber tone. Now, Quinn did not get asked directly about Joe Witt, but during the presser did have this exchange between Commanders insider J.P. Finley of NBC4 and Quinn.
Hey, Dan, recognizing it's only 4 games into a 17-game season, what is your timeline like where, okay, we gotta coach guys up on repeated mistakes versus when does it become, okay, we gotta change something, whether it's personnel or how we operate?
Yeah, you want to do both. You're kind of coaching all the time through it first, JP, to make sure the technique's right. Can we dig into something to get it aligned like we want it to align? Then the second thing you want to see is there repeat, issues that could come up, whether it's scheme or player. And now you have 4 games of work as opposed to, 1 or 2. So that's what I want to make sure we don't miss on these opportunities. Like you just acknowledge we're, roughly 1 quarter into it, and some of the things that I like, I want to see more of. Some of the things that we need to improve upon, ball hawking defensively to get better into that space, third down on offense. Those are some things that we can now shine a light on to make sure. Let's give that some extra attention, knowing that's going to be really important to what we do.
When is it time to change something for a unit that isn't working? That essentially was the question right there for Dan Quinn. It is too early for major changes with the Commanders' defensive coaching staff, but what was on display in this loss at the Falcons was terrible. Nothing is a bigger problem for the Commanders' defense right now than the giving up of big passing plays. The Commanders on Sunday afternoon allowed Falcons quarterback Michael Penix Jr. to have a yards per pass attempt of 12.04 and a yards per completion of 15.65. Staggering numbers. Those are college football-like numbers. The Commanders in this regular season have allowed opposing teams to register a yards per pass attempt of 8.08. Way too high. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between Commanders insider John Keim of ESPN and Dan Quinn.
One of the themes has been those explosive plays in the pass game allowed. Why does that keep happening, and what can you guys do to fix that?
Yeah, and we definitely have to. It's for sure, a combination of things. Like most things, when there's some issues that you want to fix, you want to get it cleaned up as quickly as you can. On some, it could be as simple as a communication of a switch of a receiver of 2 and 3. Certainly helps from our pass rush when we're really ripping into that space to go. And then communication, like in line, how does it go? The calls quickly to communicate to one another. So we'll work really hard to nail that. We have to, and we will get better at that for sure.
We way too often are seeing opposing pass catchers running wide open. We heard Dan Quinn mention the pass rush. The Commanders have suffered yet another blow to their pass rush. Quinn on Monday afternoon revealed that edge defender Javonte Jean-Baptiste in the loss at the Falcons suffered a torn pectoral muscle and was headed to the reserve/injured list. Edge defender Dietrich Wise Jr. is on the reserve/injured list, on which he was placed on September 15th. This due to a quadriceps injury that he suffered in the loss at the Packers. So you look at Commanders edge defenders in the loss at the Falcons. Dorrance Armstrong played on 60% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. Jacob Martin, 51%. Jalen Holmes, 38%. Von Miller, 32%. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, 28%. And Preston Smith was a healthy and active for a second consecutive game, but you'd think that he's likely to be active for the team's game at the Los Angeles Chargers this Sunday afternoon at 4:25. Another big problem for the Commanders' defense in the loss at the Falcons was tackling. The Commanders for this regular season, per Sport Radar, have 22 missed tackles over 4 games, an average of more than 5 per game. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between Commanders insider Tom Schad of the Washington Post and Dan Quinn.
Dan, what's your level of concern with the missed tackles yesterday, and is there anything you can do mid-season to address that?
Oh, yeah, there's plenty to do. In each practice, in each day, you can work on that hard time. It doesn't have to be something that you have to take to the ground, but you do have to get your angles, your tracking correct. But they're way too high. We were in double digits, and if you hit double digits between defense and special teams, that is too many. Going into it, we knew Bijan, is somebody that's exceptional at that. But you track 2-man tackles, and we've got work to do. Yeah, we were not pleased with our tackling performance. And yes, there is plenty you can do to work on that.
Tackling was a big-time problem for the Commanders' run defense in the loss at the Falcons. The Commanders allowed Falcons running backs Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier to combine for 33 carries for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also, Robinson had 4 receptions for 106 yards on 5 targets. He had a 1st and 10, 69-yard reception in the third quarter. The Commanders allowed receiver Drake London to have a 2nd and 16, 43-yard reception in the second quarter. The Commanders' defense on second and third downs on Sunday afternoon. Big problem. The Commanders allowed the Falcons to go 6 for 12 on third downs. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between David Aldridge of The Athletic and Dan Quinn.
Dan, the 2nd and longs and 3rd and longs that they were able to consistently get, big yardage chunk plays on that. I mean, where is the line between a physical mistake, whether it's somebody not getting home on the rush and somebody not taking a good angle, and then the communication issues that allow people to kind of run free?
Sure. I think you're right. We didn't talk about the 2nd and longs because up until maybe through the first half, through the first 3 games and into the first half, defensively on third down, that would actually we've been leaning into one of our strengths. But I thought the same as you. We had some 2nd and longs that were able to be converted. It was 2nd and 12, 2nd and 15, maybe might even been 2nd and 17. that's a one you want to be in. Like there's something that took place good to go. So heading into the last drive, that's where the third down I was disappointed in, because I said, like, over the first I'm calling it 3.5 weeks, but I meant like the first half of the game. I think there might have been 2 of 6, but 3 conversions DA on the last drive. That was hard. That was difficult. It wasn't just one call. One had been a zone pressure, one had been a man-to-man, one had been a man pressure, and that's where it has to be all connected. But as far as the second downs go, usually that's a screen or you give up to one. So for us to give up some on those, you're setting yourself up for a great third down. And so to not nail those, I think that was one of the examples where I just didn't feel the same type of energy intensity that I'd seen just the week before. And so we're going to really push hard to make sure this sustains, man, all the way throughout the game. And if we do that, I know what that looks like. And when we don't, unfortunately, I also have proof of that.
All right, Commanders' interior defensive lineman in the loss at the Falcons. Daron Payne played on 65% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. Javon Kinlaw, 62%. Eddie Goldman, 37%. Johnny Newton, 35%. I mentioned the Commanders' run defense being bad. It was, but oddly enough, the Commanders did total 7 tackles for loss. That's surprising, right? The Commanders did have some run stuffs. Commanders linebackers in the loss at the Falcons. Bobby Wagner played on 100% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. Frankie Louvu, 100%. And that was it. No other Commanders linebacker played on a single defensive snap in the game. Jordan McGee, Nick Bellore, Ale Cajo, and Kane Medrano each did not play on any of the Commanders' defensive snaps, but did play on special teams. A play that has gotten a good bit of attention is Wagner getting burned by Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts Sr. on a reception. Bobby Wagner, age 35 season. We love him, right? Still very good against the run. Still a really good pass rusher. But him in pass coverage, not so much. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between Commanders insider Ben Standig of Last Man Standing on Substack and Dan Quinn.
Bobby's obviously a tremendous player. Just last week he had 2 sacks and looked really good. At 35, it's also reasonable to say maybe he's lost his step in coverage. How do you weigh that between, hey, this guy, we have to have him on the field at all times because he's our signal caller, but simultaneously, maybe there's other aspects of his game, but how do we de-emphasize the importance of? Is that a discussion you guys ever have?
We discuss a lot of the guys, but specifically not to a matchup to, that we're regarding with him. Like I said, I think you're probably talking about the long swing that went, right, for a long play. That could have been a matchup that could have happened on other plays as well. And so I think, where do you take the lesson from it when you're going through traffic? You take the air out of it. So I think Bobby would be the first to tell you, technique is first, and so if you get into that first, that can, play through a matchup to go, okay, he's not outside man-to-man, by himself on somebody in a tough matchup. So you try to mitigate those things with he and any of the guys as best you can. But, also give credit to Atlanta. Like the guy also made a fantastic play. I couldn't have been more impressed by Jeremy's speed on that particular play. It would have been nice to hold them to a field goal into that space just to demonstrate how he expressed how hard he'll play. He was absolutely flying.
Well, the Bobby Wagner issue is part of a larger question of, are specific Commanders defensive players being picked on in pass coverage? Is that part of the Commanders' porous pass defense? And the answer is yeah. Yeah. Cornerback Marshon Lattimore. He in the loss at the Falcons played on 100% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. I mentioned that 43-yard reception by Drake London in the second quarter. Second and 16 for the Falcons at their 31 with 10:43 left in the second quarter. Lattimore committed a 5-yard defensive holding penalty that was declined in getting burned by London on the 43-yard reception. So Lattimore gave up the catch and committed a penalty. If you look at yards per coverage snap among qualified outside corners for this regular season for the NFL's next-gen stats, Lattimore, as of games through Sunday, was dead last in the NFL, 2.9. He is getting picked on big time, and he has become a penalty machine. Marshon Lattimore now has played in 9 regular season and postseason games for the Commanders. 2 games last regular season, 3 games last postseason, and 4 games this regular season. He, over those 9 games, has totaled 11 penalties. 11 penalties in 9 games. Not good. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between David Aldridge and Dan Quinn.
Dan, do you think anybody is being targeted in particular on defense, or do you think it's just a matter of on a particular play, there's, again, a physical or a communication issue that leaves somebody isolated that maybe shouldn't be isolated?
Yeah, a little bit of both, Dave, to be honest with you. There could be, at some point, somebody has a hard down. Like, that's just how it is. If it's man-to-man, it's outside. If you're in zones, oftentimes, like, who's number 3, that can be a linebacker, and you don't want that matchup to go. So there could be 20 times where the matchup could have happened, but the certain formation didn't click to go. So I think it's a little bit of a combination of both. Certainly give credit to Atlanta to, schematically have some, but we've also, got to have the right leverage. You got to have the right techniques. And if you do that, you give yourself a fighting chance even when they're hard. But if you don't, boy, we all know, like, hard matchup and poor technique, that'll put you in a bad space fast.
Well, as far as other Commanders cornerbacks in the loss at the Falcons, Jonathan Jones is on the reserve/injured list, on which he was placed on September 17th. This due to a hamstring injury that he suffered in the loss at the Packers. Mikey Sainristil played on 92% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. Trey Amos, 91%. Noah Igbenogany, 6%. Antonio Hamilton Sr. did not play on any of the Commanders' defensive snaps, but did play on special teams. The Commanders on Saturday afternoon announced having elevated Hamilton from the practice squad for this game. Commander safeties in the loss at the Falcons. Will Harris is on the reserve/injured list, on which he was placed on September 22nd. This due to a fractured fibula that he suffered in the win over the Raiders. Percy Butler was inactive for this game at the Falcons. This due to a hip injury that he dealt with in the win over the Raiders. Quan Martin played on 100% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. Jeremy Reeves, 89%. Darnell Savage, 14% in his Commanders debut, and Tyler Owens did not play on any of the Commanders' defensive snaps, but did play on special teams. How fixable is the Commanders' defense? Well, again, it has played well in 2 of the team's 4 games this regular season. I don't think that the defense is a total lost cause, but the 2 good games for the defense came against, shall we say, unimpressive offenses. And the defense, when it has been bad, has been alarmingly bad. This issue of pass catchers running wide open has got to get fixed. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between Mitch Tischler of Monumental Sports Network and Dan Quinn.
Being a quarter of the way through the season, we've heard the past couple weeks, both players and coaches talk about eye discipline and communication on the defensive side of the ball. Is there a need to kind of simplify things a little bit, make things easier for both player and coach as far as, sussing these things out, particularly when players are in motion?
Yeah, the main thing is, Mitch, there hasn't been a lot of change to go. So if there is something that we have to take out, I think we would. I don't feel like we're at that space, but if there is repeated communication issues, then the plan, you're exactly right, would come down smaller and smaller and smaller again to do that. I think the best way is continue to ramp up in the meetings, talk it, in the walkthrough, talk it, on the field, talk it, and acknowledge when plays come up. You repeat them again in practice to make sure, Mitch, that there is no gray in some of these. Now, there's a time or two when there's a new concept or a new play that offense does that you're going to take time to go through. But what you don't want to miss on ever are things that you've been doing. And just because of speed motion or something happens that you get out of whack. So I want to make sure that's the difference. The things that you can control and that you have good training on, man, don't miss those. Nail those every single time. If they come up with a new look or new wrinkle and you talk your way through that, that's normal football. That happens, often. But, man, let's make sure the stuff that we have practiced, that we have down, like Mitch, that we nail those, 10 out of 10 times.
All right, a lot to be thinking about, a lot to be talking about if you are a Commanders fan. And so if you're on Instagram, make sure that you're following WSH on the Daily. The handle is at WSH on the Daily. WSH on the Daily provides outstanding daily Commanders coverage. The page is updated every day, always has a great fresh look. WSH on the Daily just started in 2021 and yet has nearly 44,000 followers. You learn a lot by following WSH on the Daily. You are entertained quite a bit by following WSH on the Daily. If you're on Instagram, check out WSH on the Daily. The handle is at WSH on the Daily. And check out WSH on the Daily's online shop, WSHonthedaily.com. Some terrific gear, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, hats, excellent materials, modern looks. So for smart, informative, fun, and engaging Commanders content, check out WSH on the Daily on Instagram. And for great merch, visit WSHonthedaily.com. More now on the Commanders off their 34-27 loss at the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday afternoon and off head coach Dan Quinn's day after the game press conference on Monday afternoon. So the Commanders in the NFL's 2025 regular season are 2-2. They have gone win, loss, so 2-0 at home, 0-2 on the road, 21-6 win over the New York Giants at Northwest Stadium on September 7th, 27-18 loss at the Green Bay Packers on Thursday Night Football on September 11th, 41-24 win over the Las Vegas Raiders at Northwest Stadium on September 21st, and now this 34-27 loss at the Atlanta Falcons on September 28th. Here was Dan Quinn during the opening statement of his press conference on Monday afternoon.
I thought just from a team standpoint, sit here 2-2. And the vibes of the 2 losses, 2 wins, lots to discuss through there. But I thought really just sustaining high energy throughout. You've heard me use different boxing analogies, and I do that with the team. Not looking to feel it out through the first round to see where it goes. You just want to be aggressive, want to be bold, right from the beginning. What I do know is that this is a resilient team. We'll grow from yesterday, and we have to. But lots for us to correct and get right, and before we take it out on the road to head out to L.A. So all that said, glad to get started with you guys this afternoon.
Yeah, the Commanders at the Los Angeles Chargers this Sunday afternoon at 4:25. The Chargers fell to 3-1 with a 21-18 loss at the New York Giants on Sunday afternoon. Let us talk Commanders offense. Will quarterback Jayden Daniels play in this game at the Chargers? Daniels, for the loss at the Falcons, was inactive for a second consecutive game. This due to a left knee injury that he suffered in the loss at the Packers. NFL insider Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, he on NFL Network's The Insiders on NFL Game Day Kickoff on Sunday morning said that Daniels is likely to be back for this game at the Chargers. This was Dan Quinn on Monday afternoon.
I know you'll probably ask also about Jayden. He had a strong workout here Saturday, and we'll take today and tomorrow and work out his practice plan. We'll go through the whole process with him this week, medically, how he feels, how he practices, and give you the updates Wednesday as I know him.
All right, so prepare yourself for another week of will he or won't he with Jayden Daniels. I did find that report from Ian Rappaport to be encouraging, so hopefully Daniels is back playing this Sunday. But I tell you, the advanced stats say that the Commanders' QB2, Marcus Mariota, played well in the loss at the Falcons. I did not think that he had a good game. Didn't think that he was terrible, but didn't think that he had some good game. And so I was surprised when I saw Mariota's advanced stats for this game. Mariota for the game had an overall grade per Pro Football Focus of 90.4. That is outstanding. PFF grades are on a scale of 0 to 100. 60 is average. And Mariota for the game as of games through Sunday had a total QBR per ESPN of 72.4. That's really good. QBR is on a scale of 0 to 100. A good friend of this podcast, PFF senior data analyst Nick Ackridge, he on X on Monday morning wrote the following about Mariota's PFF grade for the game being so high, quote, "The box score numbers don't show the 3 completions for 55 yards called back due to offensive penalties and the perfectly thrown deep ball that was incomplete due to pass interference that would have added another 40 yards to his stats," end quote. It is not often that a quarterback has the underwhelming underwhelming stats that Mariota had and has that high of an overall grade per PFF. Mariota had a completion percentage of just 59.26, had a yards per pass attempt of just 5.78, had a yards per completion of just 9.75, threw an interception, committed an intentional grounding penalty, was barely a factor as a runner, quarterbacked a Commanders offense that went just 1 for 8 on third downs. Now, it did have 2 touchdown passes, the second of which came on a fourth down, as he did quarterback a Commanders offense that went 2 for 2 on fourth downs. But still, a shockingly high overall grade per PFF, 90.4. Good for Marcus Mariota. So we'll see if Jayden Daniels is back for this game at the Chargers. What about right guard Samuel Cosmi? He is on the reserve/physically unable to perform list on which he was placed on August 26th. This due to a torn right ACL that he suffered in the 45-31 win at the Detroit Lions this past January 18th in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. So Cosmi is eligible to come off the list this week. We on Monday afternoon had this exchange between Commanders insider Nikki Zavala of The Athletic and Dan Quinn.
How about Stan Cosmi? I know this is the first week that he's eligible to be activated. What's your plan there for him?
Yeah, we're going to huddle up here soon, but Nikki, but he's getting closer for sure for begin his window to begin practice. We'll give you a definite answer on that Wednesday, but he's really put in a lot of work to begin that window to begin the practicing. So we'll huddle up on that tonight and tomorrow, but I'll give you an answer for that Wednesday. But it's definitely trending in the right spot, Nikki.
Okay, so Sam Cosmi could practice on Wednesday afternoon. We'll see. The Commanders' starting offensive line for the loss at the Falcons was the same as in the win over the Raiders. So Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, Chris Paul at left guard, Tyler Biotish at center, Andrew Wiley at right guard, and Josh Connerly Jr. at right tackle. Each of the Commanders' starting 5 offensive linemen played on 100% of the team's offensive snaps. So Laramie Tunsil for the game had an overall grade per Pro Football Focus of 80.8. Offensive tackle Trent Scott played on 16% of the Commanders' offensive snaps as he played a good bit for a second consecutive game. Guard Nick Allegretti played on 1 of the Commanders' offensive snaps as Andrew Wiley for a second consecutive game got the start at right guard over Allegretti. Offensive tackle George Fant did not play on any of the Commanders' offensive snaps but did play on special teams. And yes, left guard Brandon Coleman for a second consecutive game was a healthy inactive. I still can't get over what is happening with Brandon Coleman. Here's a guy the Commanders took him in the 3rd round of the 2024 NFL Draft out of TCU. He was the team's starting left tackle for much of last season. He was supposed to be the Commanders' starting left guard for this season, but he off being the starting left guard for each of the team's first 2 games of this regular season. Now has been a healthy and active for each of the last 2 games. He hasn't just been benched, he has been made inactive. Commanders receivers in the loss at the Falcons. Terry McLaurin was inactive due to the quadriceps injury that he suffered in the win over the Raiders. Noah Brown, for a second consecutive game, was inactive due to groin and knee injuries. Deebo Samuel Sr., he had 6 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown on 6 targets and had 3 carries for 9 yards. He also drew a 25-yard defensive pass interference penalty. He did have a fumble that he did recover. He played on 86% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. He, for the game, had an overall grade per Pro Football Focus of 76.1, so he continues to do well. Jalen Lane had 2 receptions for 18 yards on 3 targets. He, in the 4th quarter, committed an offensive pass interference penalty that offset a Falcons penalty. He played on 44% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. He, for the game, had an overall grade per Pro Football Focus of 76.9, although, yes, he struggled on punt returns. So Lane had 2 punt return opportunities, each of which came late in the 2nd quarter. He muffed the catch on each of his 2 punt return opportunities. Luke McCaffrey, he had 2 receptions for 21 yards and a touchdown on 3 targets. He committed a 10-yard offensive pass interference penalty. He played on 37% of the Commanders' offensive snaps, but also with McCaffrey was him killing it on kickoff returns. He over 6 kickoff returns totaled 199 yards. That works out to an average of 33.17 yards per return. He had a 58-yard kickoff return in the 2nd quarter, and his 199 kickoff return yards were the most by a Washington player in a regular season game since receiver Brandon Banks had 213 kickoff return yards in the Redskins' 37-25 loss at the Detroit Lions on October 31st, 2010. Halloween 2010. Do you remember that game? That game, a very famous game in which Skins quarterback Donovan McNabb got benched in favor of Rex Grossman. What a controversy that was at the time. Chris Moore, he again played a lot. He had no receptions on 3 targets, but he played on 70% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. And Tay Martin had 1 reception for 14 yards on 1 target in playing on 16% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. So the Commanders on Saturday afternoon announced having elevated Martin from the practice squad for this game. Commanders tight ends in the loss at the Falcons. John Bates, for a second consecutive game, was inactive due to groin and calf injuries. Zach Ertz had 2 receptions for 21 yards on 4 targets. He did have a fumble out of bounds. He also committed a 5-yard false start penalty. He played on 61% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. Speaking of penalties, Ben Sinnott, no targets. He committed a penalty on offense and a penalty on special teams. He played on 47% of the Commanders' offensive snaps on a 1st and 10 for the Commanders at their 45 with 14:34 left in the third quarter. Sinnott committed a 10-yard holding penalty, negating a 32-yard reception by Jalen Lane, and Sinnott committed a 10-yard holding penalty on a kickoff return by Luke McCaffrey on the next to last snap of the third quarter. Not good. Colson Yankoff, he had no targets in playing on 18% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. And Commanders running backs in the loss at the Falcons. Austin Eckler is on the reserve/injured list, on which he was placed on September 15th. This due to a torn Achilles that he suffered in the loss at the Packers. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, keep in mind, he was questionable for this game at the Falcons due to a knee injury, but he had 7 carries for 47 yards and had 2 receptions for 10 yards on 2 targets and playing on 35% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. He, for the game, had an overall grade per Pro Football Focus of 73.8. Chris Rodriguez Jr., he had 7 carries for 59 yards and had no targets and playing on 35% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. And Jeremy McNichols had 2 carries for 3 yards and had 1 reception for no yards on 2 targets and playing on 33% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. You talk about running back by committee. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, 35% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. Chris Rodriguez, 35% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. Jeremy McNichols, 33% of the Commanders' offensive snaps. I do want to see more carries for Krosky-Merritt and Rodriguez. And specific to this loss at the Falcons, you know, with the Commanders' defense being so bad, running the ball more and eating more clock and keeping the Falcons' offense off the field would not have been a bad idea. The Commanders in this game, though, did barely have the ball in the first quarter. The Commanders lost the time of possession battle for the game by 8 minutes, 30 seconds, but that could have been a lot worse. The Commanders, with 49 seconds left in the first quarter, trailed 10-0, had run just 3 offensive plays to the Falcons' 20, and had -6 total net yards of offense to the Falcons' 118. Dan Quinn, during his post-game press conference on Sunday afternoon, talked about the Commanders having gotten off to slow starts in the 2 losses. Man, was that a slow start on Sunday afternoon. So we, this Wednesday at 9 a.m., have the introductory press conference for the Nationals president of baseball operations. So that person reportedly will be Boston Red Sox senior vice president, assistant general manager Paul Taboni. And we on Monday had season-ending press conferences for Orioles interim manager Tony Mansolino and Orioles president of baseball operations and general manager Mike Elias. The O's, like the Nats, had a highly disappointing 2025 season. The O's in MLB's 2025 regular season went 75-87 with a run differential of -111. Worst record in the American League East. Second worst run differential in the American League. Fourth worst run differential in MLB. Now, I mentioned Mike Elias' title being president of baseball operations and general manager. This has been confusing. We on September 11th had reports that Orioles executive vice president and general manager Mike Elias actually isn't the Orioles executive vice president and general manager, as it was revealed that Orioles controlling owner David Rubenstein this past offseason quietly promoted Elias to president of baseball operations, and that the O's now are searching for a general manager. The O's now are referring to Elias as their president of baseball operations and general manager. But yes, they are searching for a GM, just as the Nats reportedly are searching for a GM to work under Paul Taboni. And the O's, like the Nats, have a managerial decision to make. The O's with Manzolino, the Nats with interim manager Miguel Cairo. I do think that there's a chance that Manzolino is retained as Orioles manager. I think that there is virtually no chance that Cairo is retained as Nats manager. The Nats need to clean house in terms of baseball operations. The O's, they're a different story. They just had their first losing regular season in 4 years. But I do think that this may well be a one-off bad season. So much of this season for the O's was about them getting walloped by injury for a second consecutive season, although there were other problems, no doubt, namely regression/lack of progress from the team's key young position players. So the O's, in the lead-up to the 2025 MLB trade deadline this past July 31st, traded a lot of their pending free agents. So the only major free agents for the O's in the 2025-2026 offseason in terms of guys on expiring contracts are starting pitcher Zach Eflin and Tomoyuki Sagano and catcher Gary Sanchez. So the O's do have a club option on infielder/outfielder Jorge Mateo for the 2026 season. Also, outfielder Tyler O'Neill can opt out, but that's considered unlikely. And then there's first baseman Ryan Mountcastle, who's arbitration eligible, but who is a big-time non-tender candidate off having a down and injury-marred 2025 season. And the O's now have two key young players in Samuel Basallo and Kobe Mayo as options for first base. I totally could see the O's non-tendering Mountcastle. But when it comes to the state of the O's, so here was Mike Elias during the opening statement of his end-of-season press conference on Monday.
We, as an organization, have talked a lot about our disappointments with this season, and I've talked a lot, and there's certainly a lot of meditation going on, ongoing behind the scenes, but this season is over, and our off season is beginning, and we are pointed forward, and we're working toward next year, and that's my entire fixation right now, is improving our season next year and bouncing back to where this group of players and this organization can and should be. We have, despite the disappointments that we all experienced this year, we have a lot of talent in this building, and I mean the front office and the coaching staff and the organization, and particularly in the clubhouse, and we have the talent to right the ship and bounce back. So we're focused on that going forward. There's a lot of work ahead of us. Our goal for this offseason is to have a team, when we start in Sarasota, to have a team that we all believe and that the baseball world believes and the rest of the division believes is of a quality to compete for the division title in 2026. So we're going to try to put that team together this winter, and I will be laser focused on that work.
Yeah, that right there is Mike Elias saying, as he had said previously, that the O's are not entering into another rebuild, that the hope is that their 2025 season was a one-off bad season. No guarantees, but I do think that there's a good chance that that's the case. What about the deal with this secret promotion of Mike Elias and the O's possibly hiring a GM? We on Monday had this exchange between O's insider Rich Dubroff of BaltimoreBaseball.com and Elias.
Mike, let's talk about your promotion, and what do you expect to also concurrently hire a general manager, and what would be that person's duties?
Yes, so I know that came out in a bit of an unusual way. That was an arrangement that we reached this year in the spring, early in the spring. And at that point in time, with everything that we had going on, it wasn't a huge immediate priority for me to announce that, or for us to announce that. And you know, as we got into the season and things started to go the way that they went, it was nowhere near my mind at that time to address that situation. But that is the case. It does provide us the ability to utilize the general manager title in a way that many other organizations and a growing number of other organizations are starting to utilize it to beef up the throughput, but also the talent in the front office. And it's something that we have begun to consider and explore. But obviously it's got to be the right person, the right fit for the Orioles, for the org, for the whole situation. And it may not happen imminently, but that is a pathway that's available to us, and it's something that we may be interested in doing. It may be this offseason, it may not be.
It was strange, it was odd, it was almost shady that the O's promoted Mike Elias without announcing that he was promoted, but what he said there did make sense. More and more we are seeing MLB teams have both a president of baseball operations and a general manager. We'll see if the O's go in that direction. And then with what happened with key young position players for the O's in the 2025 regular season, regression/lack of progress. Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Jackson Holliday, Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser, Ryan Mountcastle, each guy demonstrated regression/lack of progress, some far worse than others. Why'd this happen? How did the O's fix this? We on Monday had this exchange between Orioles insider Steve Molesky of Steve on Baseball on Substack and Mike Elias.
Mike, a lot of the talk this year was about improving the rotation, for next year. But as the season went on, the offense continued to struggle, and some young players did not take steps forward. How much of a priority now is the offense and improving that for 20 and 26? And do you have to look outside the organization?
Yeah, when you have a season that misses the mark by this much, there's a lot on the list of what went wrong. But certainly that was amongst the most. I don't know if I want to say surprising, but kind of fundamental that a lot of our core drafted players that have formed the spine of not only this winning team the last few years, but the rebuild leading into it. A lot of them, most of them, were hurt or had down years or stagnating in some form or fashion. And, it's definitely concerning to watch, and concerning to watch it happen to a lot of them simultaneously. I mean, that was a big factor in our record. We have talked a lot with them individually about it. They're all, I think all of us in the org, there's a lot of soul searching and looking in the mirror and individually what could have each of us done better to get a better result for the team. And that definitely applies to those guys. We've talked about it. We're formulating plans, and we're going to do everything that we can to kind of have them bounce back and get back on track. Very, very, very confident that that's going to happen with this group, and it's obviously a huge factor for the team next year. But the talent in those guys and the work ethic and the mindset all points to optimism.
Yeah, I think a big factor in who the O's go with as manager will be who Mike Elias believes can get the most out of the team's core of young, talented players. These guys are not going to be on cheap contracts via being under team control forever. The time for the O's to maximize having these guys on team-friendly contracts is now. And that'll do it for you and me for now. Keep the feedback coming. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Wednesday show, episode 1167, will include a lot for you on the Commanders, including a deep dive on what's going on with their defense, as I'll chat with Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
You got it, babe.